Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, thanks for joining us. My name is Liz Pena. I'm a marketing specialist here at Verity IT. Email might be the most critical business application your company uses today. All businesses depend on email as a necessary form of communication. But the real question is your email really secure? Today's webinar will cover everything you need to know to reduce the likelihood of a malicious email attack on your business. We're joined today by Melanie to discuss the impact of email threats further. Melanie has been in the software and technology field for over 12 years. Cybersecurity is now her focus, and she continues to educate others in the ever-evolving world of technology. Thanks for joining us, Melanie.
Yes, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, sounds good.
All right, awesome. Yes, thanks everyone. Like Liz said, my name is Melanie. Today I'm going to be talking to you about business email security, some of the problems that are out there that you should be paying attention to, and some of the risks that are out there today. So we're going to talk about that. Specifically, let's take a look at what we're going to dive into. So when we look at the email threat landscape of today, there's many potential risks out there, and we're going to cover a few of those today. Some of those being business email compromise. That would be when attacker takes over your organization's email. Unknown malware and what that is and what that potential to your organization. Mitigation strategies. So how can we prevent some of these threats and attacks? And then advanced protection. What should you be putting in place as far as security to protect against these type of attacks? And then we're going to touch on compliance. What areas of compliance might be out there today since attacks are rising year over year? We want to talk about some compliance requirements that might be needed for some of these advanced protections. Okay, so let's talk about the landscape a little bit. The unfortunate reality is that there are many organizations that are being attacked, and they're becoming more and more known, right? You can't turn on the news nowadays without really kind of seeing something about a breach or some potential ransomware attack that might have happened to a high level organization. We take a look at the Colonial Pipeline attack or maybe the ransomware attack that happened in the city of Tulsa. These are all just examples of how strategic some of these attackers are getting to really shut down potential organizations, companies, or anything like that. So it's one of those things that we hear about all the time on the news, but it's becoming more and more a reality for even smaller organizations as well. And why is that, right? How is well, if we take a look, there was a study done by Verizon in 2019 that actually shows that 94% of malware incidents actually came from email, right? So it's a scary number because, realistically, we're in and out of our email all day. We rely heavily on our email for communication, sharing files, collaborating with colleagues, or maybe sharing information with our customers. So this is, something that we're all highly susceptible to because we're in our email all day. So 94% is quite a scary number. So that being said, most of us are using Office 365 and Microsoft, right, for email. If you take a look here on the screen, we could take a look here. It might be small, so I apologize. But what we're looking at is the actual service description from Office 365 that specifically talks about what is in place for anti-spam and anti-malware. Well, what it says is that it actually can catch all known malware. And that's a key word right there, known malware, right? Because, organizations really, especially Office 365, are only able to protect you against 5% of malware that's known. So what does that mean? Well, there's another 95% that's unknown. And basically think about this. So if an attacker puts out a malware, attack, and it becomes known, right? What that attack is like, how it functions, how it moves through an organization. Well, now it's known, right? So now it can be blocked for the future. However, what happens when, the attackers figure out, oh, my malware attack is no longer being effective. Well, I'm going to change it, right? I'm going to change it slightly. So now it falls back into that unknown category, right? So these are the scariest ones. An analogy that we like to look at is a smoke detector guaranteed to detect 5% of the fires? If that were the case, would it be good enough, right? Probably not. You'd want something that's actually protecting against 100% of fires, right? So those are the kind of things that we talk about. And obviously with email being the number one source of attacks, everyone needs a strategy to deal with that unknown malware and protect themselves for future attacks. This is another kind of stat and number. In 2019, this kind of shows one of the threat landscapes that was in place specifically for Office 365. And we take a look, there was over 12.5 million attacks that were stopped, including phishing emails, business email compromise, malware. All of these were threats that were actually missed by Office 365 and caught with just by having an additional email security piece in place. So this is a huge number as well. Again, this is from 2019, so I would anticipate that this number is probably even higher now. But we take a look at 11.3 million phishing emails that were caught, right, that got through on Office 365. So we really have to be diligent on making sure that we have an additional security layer on top of our email. So let's take a look at some of the ways that, how are they compromising email, right? What are the attack methods, and what are some of the ways that they're able to make that happen? Well, we take a look here. We see spear phishing, right? Spear phishing is really a social engineered attack that maybe they're taking key pieces of information to make it look like a realistic email, or that they know you, right? Maybe they're going on LinkedIn and gathering your title, or maybe you had a recent promotion and they're going to somehow put that into the email, right, to make it look like you may have worked with them before. And it's targeting a specific person. Maybe this person is the CFO of the organization and they handle the finances, right? So it's someone that's maliciously going after a specific person to try to breach their email. CEO fraud is a very similar one. It's a phishing attack where it's actually a spoofed email, and a spoofed email is actually just another word for impersonating. So we take a look at maybe someone in the organization gets an email that appears to be from the CEO, maybe requesting some type of payment or financial or some type of wire transfer, for example, over to some other organization. And there's always a urgency with these types of transfers or payments. A lot of the times those are known as CEO fraud, right? Where someone's impersonating an email that looks like it's coming from the CEO asking for a very specific financial transaction. Unfortunately, that's a very, very common one that's done today and a very effective one. So it's something that we need to be aware of. A little bit of stats on the business email compromise attacks regarding Office 365. So the FBI actually kind of issued a statement, and they said back in, back in March of 2020, they issued this. Between January of 2014 and October of 2019, they received complaints totaling over 2.1 billion with a B in actual losses from business email compromise scams, and they were targeting specific Microsoft Office 365 users. And that's really scary, right? Because now we know that attackers find that there is a level of ability to breach through Office 365. So we really have to make sure we have that security layer in place in addition to our email. And the reason this is happening is because they're very difficult to detect. These type of threats are very difficult. Like I said, they're impersonating someone's email. They're not really including attachments. They're asking for some type of action. They're not including links, right? It's just a matter of impersonating someone or sending out a fake email. So very, very difficult to detect. So speaking of difficult to detect, we're going to talk about credential phishing. This is a very common one too of how a business email compromise can happen, right? And this is outside of email, right? So let's kind of take a pivot here. We're taking a look at gaining access to your Office 365 account. So what you're looking at here is an example of a potential credential phishing. And if you look at this, you might get an email that says, hey, in 10 days, your password for Office 365 is going to expire. Please reset your password, right? It's time. It's going to expire in 10 days. Okay. That's just an example. I actually received one of those today myself. So when you look at this, there may be it's at that email, there may be a URL embedded in there, right? And it says click here to go change your email, or I'm sorry, click here to go change your password or update your password. Very common. So we look here, everything looks legitimate about this. We have the Microsoft logo right here. You would see your email listed, and then it says, hey, enter here so you can sign in, right? Everything looks ideal. Even the background drop, right? Even the background drop looks pretty legitimate. However, if we take a deeper look and really kind of focus on the URL, this is not a legitimate domain. This is fake. Obviously, if you're logging into Office 365, it should say office.com. Definitely does not say that. So this is one way to kind of, be keen and make sure that you're not, entering credentials. However, if you're not on the lookout for this, this is a very easy one to have happen to you. All right. So once that happens, let's say you entered those credentials. This is what would happen with the email account takeover, right? Now, not only are if you enter your Office 365 credentials in that fake URL, now an attacker has your credentials. And what are they going to do with them? Well, guess what? They're going to log into Office 365 as you, and now they have the ability to steal your data, copy email, and the scary part is we don't think about it. Access all of our online kind of applications, right? So we take a look now. We're talking above and beyond just email. We're talking about very sensitive file sharing applications like SharePoint, right? There might be critical information there that share amongst your colleagues internally. And now there's an attacker that has access to all of that information as well. And then, we talk about Excel documents, Excel online. You might have financial information in there or critical customer information in there. They have access to all of that now, right? So that's something that is a little bit scary to think about too. And then the other thing we have to be crucially kind of responsible about thinking about is sending phishing emails, right? So now that this person or attacker has your credentials, well, guess what? Now they can actually send phishing emails that are actually legitimately coming from you, and that's scary, right? Because they can say whatever they want. They can ask for critical information. They could ask for payment of some type. They can ask for financial documentation. So it could go anywhere it wants. But the point I'm trying to share here is the credentials are key, and it's another common way that they are getting into our email. That being said, it only takes one, right? That was an example of one person in the organization entering their credentials unknowingly, and that attacker being able to access their system, but then also having access to all other information as well as other people's emails. So that's kind of the point I wanted to make here. And then, cyber attacks in general are getting in the way. We've seen an increase of over 67% in the last 5 years. With those security breaches, like we talked about, some of the ones that you've seen in the news, those were pretty big organizations, but we don't always hear about the smaller organizations that they got put out of business because they had a ransomware attack that required them to pay, I don't know, millions of dollars for encrypted so they can get them back, right? A lot of companies can't afford to pay that. So in turn, things happen to their business. So we want to make sure that we're really kind of aware of the security breaches and their potential so that we can prevent them from happening in the future. One of the ways that we can do that is, like I talked about, some of those advanced features is really making sure that you have a security layer in place that is on top of your existing email or file sharing applications, right? So having something that ties directly in or is integrated directly into your Office 365 and file sharing, this is a great way to protect yourself. So, these are applications that we all use every day. Exchange is for your email, OneDrive is your storage for files, SharePoint, right? This is where we kind of collaborate and maybe post information for others internally. A big one, that's become very, I guess, is Teams, more so in the last probably 2 years, because Teams not only, is for collaborating with meetings and having, kind of person to person, if you will, meetings, but it also is where people share a lot of files, right? After a meeting, they might say, oh, can you share that slide deck with me? Or can you post that information or send me that information? Well, instead of them sending it via email, they can save it in a file within Teams, right? So now Teams might even house a lot of sensitive data, right? So we got to protect that too. And then we take, a look at other file sharing applications like Box or Dropbox, or even Google Drive or Gmail, right? These are things that we need to protect as well. And, that goes back to that 12.5 million of high risk threats that were missed by Office 365. This is why it's crucial to have that layer on top. So we said we're going to talk about compliance, right? Common compliance requirements. I would say these are becoming more and more common within the last couple of years. I would say really prominent probably within the last 2 to 3 years, where there's insurance companies out there that say, we've seen the impact of ransomware on organizations, and hey, Mr. Business, in order for us to give you an insurance policy, we have a requirement that you have to have certain levels of cybersecurity in place to, you know, underwrite or write that insurance policy. So we're seeing this more and more every day, actually. And I wanted to kind of give you some of the key buzzwords or acronyms to kind of keep an ear out for. So just in case, that comes across your desk. EDR, that is a endpoint detection and response capability. I would say this is probably the number one requirement right now that is becoming part of compliance. This is an additional sensor on top of your actual endpoint, which is a machine or server, that a lot of companies are requiring. XDR, just an extended detection and response. So the detection and response here is taking your email information as well as your endpoint information and taking a look at that data and making sure that everything is in order and there's no potential threats. MDR is another term you might hear, managed detection and response. This is really a 24/7 security operations center that has a human element to it. And there's someone physically, proactively scanning and looking at any type of threats or alerts that might have come while you might be asleep, right? So these are common, like I said, compliance requirements that you might hear. So I wanted to kind of give you those buzzwords and acronyms should you hear those out and about. And what I want to show you here is a visualization. It's not meant to be technical. It's just really a visualization of what endpoint and email detection means, right? And what it looks like. Here we can see an example of a threat, and it kind of will show you, if you have your endpoint and email protection in place, those two components, you're going to be able to see the full story of where threat started and where it ended up. So you have full visibility, right? So we take a look here. We can see that there was an alert here. Something came in via email to Outlook, and they clicked and opened that email. Well, guess what? Without a detection and response layer in place, we wouldn't be able to tell this full story. We wouldn't be able to say, see who else received this email. Is this malicious file in other mailboxes, right? We don't know unless we have this layer in place. As you can see in this example, yes, there were 7 other recipients. There was 2 attachments and actually 4 embedded URLs, right? And in addition to that, you can actually decide what action you want to take. Now that you know that those 7 recipients received that, do you want to quarantine that message and stop it from going to other people, right? Without that detection and response type of security in place, this particular example wouldn't be possible. You wouldn't be able to see the full chain of attack, if you will, and find out where those other messages may have landed. So what else can we do to mitigate our risk, right? In organizations, we talked about, the type of software that we need in place. We've talked about the sensors and different layers of security that we need on top of our email. But there's also a human factor to it, right? We talk about security awareness training, and that definitely is a piece of our threat landscape. We need to constantly be, aware of what we're getting in our email, right? And consciously aware of what we're clicking on. Security awareness training is something that is an ongoing thing. Obviously, as the threat landscape changes and the attackers are coming up with new and crazy ways to get into our systems, we have to be really, really aware of what's coming through our email. Looking at security awareness, we could say, okay, well, how do we simulate a phishing attack and make sure that our organization internally is aware, right? Well, we can create something that looks similar to this. Now, as you can see, maybe here's a good one: Outlook mail on hold, right? Obviously, this is simulated. This isn't a real phishing attack, but this is something that you could send out internally into your organization and make sure that they're aware enough to not click on this or not enter their credentials or, provide any critical information that might allow for that business email compromise to take place. So that's crucial. The more we're aware, the more human, element that we have to protect ourselves as well. And then, when you do these type of campaigns, you can track and actually see the responses, right? Here, for example, 3 people out of that fake Outlook email that was sent out, 3 of them actually posted credentials, right? So now we can go, okay, maybe we need to take a look and do some additional training, right? Not only in addition to the software security that we have in place, but we also need to train our employees to be socially aware as well with what they're clicking. So I think that's a good overview today so far. Let me just see here. I think we have, yeah. Liz, I think you're still there. We have questions that we want to from the crew here that we want to review.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melanie. We do. We had 2 questions pop in the Q&A box.
Okay.
The first one is, what should you do if you suspect your email account has been compromised?
Oh yeah. Well, first things first, change your password and make it complex and definitely not not similar to your previous password. This is crucial because, looking at like that example that I gave of the credential phishing, if you go ahead and change your password, if you think that you were compromised, that immediately cuts off any access that they might have to regaining access, right? The next thing I would say is enable two-factor authentication within your organization if you haven't done so already. That would be a proactive thing, I would say, even before a potential compromise, right? Making sure you have that extra step to logging in by sending a unique code to your phone in order to log in, right? So that's another one. Change your security questions. I've can see people that use the same security questions over and over again. It's definitely easy to kind of compromise those as well or figure them out. So I would say change those on a regular basis. And then check your settings, because there's actually a way for your emails to be auto forwarded to someone else without you knowing. So for example, if you were compromised, they go into your settings and they say, forward all emails to this address. They could be maliciously doing things behind the scenes without you even knowing. So that's another thing, is check your settings as well. And then obviously, inform your IT provider as well. Yeah, that would be a good start.
Awesome. Thank you. And then the second one we had is, in regards to security awareness training, how often should this be done?
Hmm. I would say so. Security awareness is an ongoing process in an organization. As we can see, attackers are constantly evolving their methods, which means we have to proactively be aware at what angles and approaches they're trying to do. Right. They're always looking at different ways to breach and spoof and impersonate and gain access to our credentials. And they're always using new ways, right? Maybe there's a new app or something else in the news, and they're going to use that to correlate in an email and make it look, different or catch your attention. So I would say, many organizations commit to doing cybersecurity awareness training campaigns on a monthly basis, just to make sure everyone's kind of sharp and knows what to look for when it comes to their email.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That is unfortunately all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us, and thank you, Melanie, for presenting for us. We hope everybody has a very productive day.
All right. Take care, everyone.